The wine glass trembled in my hand as I set it on the nightstand, my nightgown rustling against the sheets. 3 months. That's how long Richard had been gone on his essential business trip, leaving me alone with my thoughts. And his son, well, he was like a son to me too. My hands wandered from time to time. How could I not let them? I needed this. That's when I heard a noise at the door. It was my stepson. I'm Tina, and I never meant for any of this to happen. At 36, I thought I'd finally found stability when I married Richard 5 years ago. He was successful, caring, and came with a teenage son who actually seemed to accept me despite the wicked stepmother stigma. James was 16 then, already showing signs of the man he'd become. But life has a way of unraveling the most carefully woven plans. Richard's trips grew longer, his calls more infrequent. The house felt larger, emptier, except for the growing awareness of James's presence. Now 19, he'd filled out in all the right places, his father's strong jawline softened by his mother's gentle eyes. That night, the loneliness was particularly suffocating. The wine had loosened something in me, something I usually kept tightly locked away. In the darkness of my bedroom, I let my guard down, let my mind drift to places it shouldn't. The soft noise escaped before I could catch it. "Tina?" His voice at my door froze me mid-motion. I heard, "Are you okay?" My heart thundered as I clutched the sheets to my chest. There stood James in the doorway, concern etched on his features, moonlight casting shadows that made him look older than his years. "I'm fine," I managed, but my voice betrayed me, coming out breathy and uncertain. "Just having trouble sleeping." His eyes met mine in the darkness, and something shifted in the air between us. Something electric, dangerous, impossible to ignore. That was the moment everything changed. The moment our careful dance of stepmom and stepson began to blur into something else entirely. But that's the thing about forbidden fruit. Once you've caught its scent, it's almost impossible to forget its sweetness. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the old house made me wonder if James was still awake, still thinking about what he'd witnessed. The morning brought no relief, just the awkward dance of avoiding each other's eyes over coffee. "I'm heading to the gym," he announced, his gym bag slung over his broad shoulder. The morning light caught his dark hair, still damp from his shower. I pretended to be engrossed in my phone, but I could feel his lingering gaze. "Have fun," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. As the door closed behind him, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The following days became an exquisite torture. Every casual brush in the hallway sent electricity through my skin. Every shared meal was laden with unspoken tension. I started noticing things I shouldn't. How his t-shirt stretched across his chest when he reached for something high. How his eyes would follow me when he thought I wasn't looking. One evening, I was preparing dinner when he came home early from his workout. The kitchen filled with his presence, the scent of his shower gel mixing with the pasta sauce I was stirring. "Need help?" he asked, reaching past me for a glass. His chest briefly pressed against my back, and I nearly dropped the wooden spoon. "I've got it," I replied, but my voice was barely a whisper. When I turned, he was closer than I expected. His eyes dropped to my lips for just a moment before he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Tina," he started, his voice rough. "About the other night." The front door opened suddenly. Richard's weekly video call. James disappeared upstairs while I plastered on a smile for my husband's pixelated face. The same husband who hadn't touched me in months, who'd rather build his empire than nurture his marriage. That night, I lay awake again, tortured by thoughts I couldn't shake. The house creaked and settled around me, and I swore I could hear James pacing in his room above mine. The space between our bedrooms felt like both miles and inches. Days turned into weeks. Richard's calls became even more sporadic. James and I developed an unspoken language. We were dancing on the edge of something dangerous, both of us knowing we should step back, but neither willing to be the first to retreat. I started taking longer showers, hoping the steam would wash away my impure thoughts. James began bringing girls home, pretty young things from his college classes. Each time I heard their giggling, their footsteps heading to his room, something dark and possessive curled in my stomach. One particularly late night, I heard him break up with his latest girlfriend on the phone. The hurt in his voice echoed through the walls, reminding me of that lost little boy who'd first accepted me into his life. Before I could stop myself, I was walking to his room, my hand raised to knock. "Come in," he called, his voice thick with emotion. I opened the door to find him sitting on his bed, shirtless, his head in his hands. The moonlight painted shadows across his sculpted torso, and I forced myself to remember my role: stepmother, caregiver, protector. But when he looked up at me with those wounded eyes, something inside me cracked. "I can't keep pretending," he whispered. Neither could I. And that's the moment we both knew. There was no going back from here. The line we'd been towing for weeks was about to be crossed, and heaven help us both. I never expected 3 months to change everything. When Richard announced his business venture in Singapore, it seemed like just another absence in a marriage already full of empty spaces. 6 months, maybe longer, he'd said casually over dinner, as if he wasn't shattering our carefully constructed routine. At first, James and I orbited each other like awkward planets, unsure of our gravity without Richard as our sun. The house felt too big, too quiet. I'd hear him coming home late from soccer practice, his gym bag thumping against the stairs, while I pretended to be engrossed in my laptop, meeting freelance writing deadlines. Everything changed the night of the blackout. A spring storm knocked out the power, and we found ourselves sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by emergency candles. James discovered an old deck of cards, and suddenly we were playing Go Fish like a pair of kids, laughing at how neither of us could remember the rules properly. "You know," he said, shuffling the cards, "I never thanked you for coming to my graduation last year. Dad was stuck in Chicago, but you were there. You even took all those embarrassing photos with my friends." That night broke something open between us. We started sharing breakfast together, me sipping coffee while he devoured enormous bowls of cereal, telling me about his classes, his dreams of becoming an architect. I found myself looking forward to our morning conversations, the way he'd gesture enthusiastically while describing his latest design project. Sundays became our day. I taught him how to make his grandmother's lasagna recipe, laughing as he managed to get flour absolutely everywhere. He introduced me to his video game world, patiently teaching me how to navigate virtual landscapes until I could almost keep up with him. We discovered shared interests we'd never known about. Both of us loved old black and white films. We'd spend rainy afternoons watching Hitchcock movies, debating plot theories. He started joining me at art galleries, offering surprisingly insightful observations about the pieces. I attended his soccer games, learning the rules just so I could properly cheer him on. When I opened my small photography exhibition, James spent the entire opening night bringing people to see my work, proudly introducing me to his friends. "This is Tina," he'd say. "She's not just my stepmom, she's an amazing artist." There were harder moments too. Late nights when he'd open up about his mother's abandonment, how he'd blamed himself for years. I shared stories about my own broken childhood, things I'd never told anyone else. We became each other's secret keepers, confidants in the quiet hours when the rest of the world slept. Richard's calls grew less frequent, but we barely noticed. We'd created our own little world of inside jokes and shared rituals. Every Thursday, we'd try a new takeout place, rating them on our increasingly elaborate scoring system. He helped me plant an herb garden, though neither of us knew anything about gardening. Most of our plants died, but the basil thrived against all odds. When he started dating a girl from his design class, I helped him plan their first date. When she broke his heart 3 weeks later, we stayed up all night building a ridiculous fortress of blankets in the living room and watching comedy specials until he smiled again. Time flowed differently in our private universe. Days blended into weeks, comfortable routines punctuated by moments of surprising connection. A shared look of understanding during phone calls with Richard. Silent support during stressful deadlines. The easy rhythm of two people learning to trust each other completely. But trust is a double-edged sword. The closer we grew, the more dangerous our comfort became. Every shared silence felt heavier with unspoken words. Every accidental touch lingered a moment too long. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Should have noticed how our innocent family dynamic was shifting into something else entirely. But sometimes the most significant changes happen in the spaces between moments, in the quiet breaths between words, in the seconds before everything changes forever. Sarah was the first to notice during our monthly wine night. "He actually folds laundry?" she asked, eyebrows raised as James carried a basket of neatly folded towels upstairs. "My kids won't even pick their clothes off the floor." I hadn't really thought about it until then. The small changes had crept in so naturally. James had started doing little things, loading the dishwasher after dinner, grocery shopping without being asked, even fixing that dripping faucet that had driven me crazy for months. "You've got yourself a better husband than Richard," my sister Kate joked during Sunday brunch, watching James mow the lawn. I scolded her, but the comment stuck with me. He had stepped up in ways his father never did. Even my book club noticed. One Wednesday evening, they arrived early to find James helping me prepare the snacks, both of us covered in flour from a baking attempt gone wrong. "Since when does your stepson bake?" Maria asked later, giving me a curious look over her glass of Chardonnay. The truth was, James had been trying everything to make my life easier since Richard left. When my car broke down, he insisted on driving me to work for a week until it was fixed. He'd wait up for me after late gallery events, claiming he was just studying, but always ready with a cup of tea and a willing ear to hear about my day. My best friend Rachel pulled me aside at her birthday party. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon," she observed. "He introduced you to his friends as Tina, not my stepmom. And did you see how he jumped to help you with those heavy platters?" I brushed off their comments, but I couldn't ignore how James had transformed from a typical teenager into something else entirely. He started asking about my photography work, offering genuine feedback on my pieces. When I mentioned wanting to repaint the living room, he spent an entire weekend helping me, carefully taping edges and touching up missed spots. The neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Anderson next door commented on how often she saw us laughing together in the garden, or returning from grocery shopping, arms full of bags. "It's nice to see you two getting along so well," she said, but there was something in her tone that made me wonder what else she saw. I overheard him on the phone with his friend once, defending our closeness. "She's been more of a parent to me than either of my actual parents," he'd said firmly. "Of course I'm going to be there for her." But it was more than just helping around the house. He noticed things, like how I take my coffee, one sugar, splash of cream. Or when I'm stressed, he'd leave chocolate on my desk. Or which movies make me cry, he'd always have tissues ready. He remembered small details about my life that even Richard had forgotten. His girlfriends didn't last long. Each one would comment on our close relationship, some jokingly, others with obvious concern. "It's weird how much time you spend with your stepmom," I overheard one say. James ended things with her the next day. "You've got that boy wrapped around your finger," my coworker Lisa said, after James surprised me with lunch at the gallery. "He treats you more like a—" She paused, searching for the right word. Well, not like a stepmom. I started to see what they meant. The way he'd light up when I entered a room. How he'd find any excuse to be near me. The proud smile when he introduced me to his friends. The lingering touches when passing dishes at dinner. Looking back, everyone saw it before I did. The shift from obligation to devotion, from family duty to something more complex. Each small gesture, every thoughtful act, was slowly building toward something neither of us was ready to name. The evening had started perfectly. A gallery opening downtown showcasing my work, James insisting on being my +1 instead of going to a college party. He charmed everyone, looking more mature than his 19 years in a fitted blazer and dark jeans. The trouble started at dinner after. We'd had wine with our meal, feeling celebratory after multiple pieces sold. That's when Eric, an art buyer I knew, stopped by our table. "Finally trading up from that absent husband?" Eric winked, clearly misreading our dynamic. "Young and handsome. Good for you, Tina." Before I could correct him, James stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "She's my stepmother," he said, voice tight with something I'd never heard before. "And you should show her more respect." The drive home was thick with tension. "He was way out of line," James muttered, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It was just a misunderstanding. I tried to smooth things over. Though I appreciate you defending my honor." "Is that what you think I was doing?" He pulled into our driveway, killing the engine. "Being the dutiful stepson?" "James." "No, let's talk about it." His voice rose. "Let's talk about how everyone sees it but you. How you pretend not to notice when I—" "Stop." My hands were shaking. "We can't have this conversation." "Why not? Because of Dad? The same Dad who hasn't touched you in months? Who doesn't see how amazing you are?" "Go to your room." I heard the tremor in my voice. "Please." He slammed his door so hard the house shook. I heard him pacing upstairs while I poured myself another glass of wine, trying to steady my nerves. The wine didn't help. All I could think about was the hurt in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when Eric assumed we were together. How part of me wished— My hands danced lower, seeking relief from the tension coiling inside me. In the darkness of my bedroom, I let myself imagine things I shouldn't. Let myself remember how he looked in that blazer, how his eyes followed me all evening. The sound escaped from my mouth before I could stop it. Then his voice at my door. "Tina?" And everything changed. The moment he came in, the guilt followed, but we both knew this was happening, and we did not stop it. The way neither of us had slept. I'd heard him pacing above me all night, matching my own restless movements. The house felt different now, charged with unspoken words. I couldn't hide in my room forever, though God knows I wanted to. When I finally ventured downstairs, James was already in the kitchen, fully dressed. "We need coffee," he said simply, not quite meeting my eyes. "Real coffee, not this house stuff." 20 minutes later, we sat in a back corner of the daily grind, as far from other customers as possible. James stirred his Americano endlessly, the spoon clinking against ceramic. "About last night," we both started simultaneously. "Let me," he said, finally looking up. "I know what I heard, and I know you know I was there." My hands tightened around my cup. "James, I was drunk, emotional." "Don't." His voice was low, intense. "Don't make excuses. Don't pretend it was just the wine talking. We've been dancing around this for months." "I'm married to your father." "My father?" He laughed bitterly. "The man who hasn't been home in 3 months, who forgot your birthday last week?" "That doesn't change." "Everything's already changed," he interrupted. "You feel it too. I know you do. The way you look at me when you think I won't notice. How you find reasons to touch me. Little touches that drive me crazy." Heat flooded my face. "We can't." "Why not?" He leaned forward. "Give me one reason that isn't about him or what people would think." I stared into my coffee, unable to find that reason. The silence stretched between us. "Last night," he continued, voice dropping lower, "when I heard you, do you know how hard it was to walk away? To not open that door?" "James, please." "Say you don't want me," he challenged. "Look me in the eyes and say it." I couldn't. We both knew I couldn't. "We need time," I managed finally. "Space to think clearly." "Fine." He stood abruptly. "Take your time. Think about it. But don't expect me to pretend anymore. I'm done acting like you're just my stepmother." He left me there, hands shaking around a cold cup of coffee, knowing everything had shifted irreversibly. The careful boundaries we'd built were crumbling, and I wasn't sure I wanted to rebuild them. That afternoon, I tried to work but couldn't focus. Every noise made me jump, wondering if he was nearby. When I heard the shower running upstairs, I caught myself imagining— No, We needed rules. Distance. But as evening approached, the house felt smaller. Every room held memories now colored differently. The kitchen where he'd taught me to play his favorite video games. The living room where we'd fallen asleep watching movies, his hand always finding reasons to brush against mine. I made dinner as usual, but he didn't come down. I heard him leave around 8, the rumble of his car fading into the night. It was almost a relief until my phone buzzed with his text. Taking time like you asked, but we both know where this is going. The question is how long you'll keep fighting it. I deleted the message, but his words stayed with me as I lay in bed, remembering the intensity in his eyes at the coffee shop, remembering how close he'd been to my door last night, just inches of wood between us. My hand wandered that night once again, but this time I didn't try to pretend I was thinking of anyone else. We need rules, I said firmly over breakfast the next morning. James sat across from me, those intense eyes watching every move. Real boundaries. I understand. His voice was controlled, mature. But I won't apologize for how I feel. We established our new normal. No more movie nights alone, no casual touches. When we talked, it was in common areas with lights on. James started dating again, a girl from his architecture program named Sophie. I pretended it didn't hurt when I heard them laughing upstairs. My call with Richard that evening was different. Either you come home, or we need to discuss our future, I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. I can't be married to your voicemail anymore. He came home 2 weeks later. Things were stiff, awkward. The house had evolved without him. James was polite but distant, spending more time at Sophie's apartment. Richard tried, weekend getaways, date nights, but something fundamental had shifted. Months passed. James graduated with honors. I sat between Richard and Sophie at the ceremony, clapping until my hands hurt when he crossed the stage. At the celebration dinner, he hugged me briefly, properly. Thank you for everything, he whispered. The double meaning hung between us. He moved out that summer, taking a job with a prestigious firm across town. Sophie moved in with him. They got engaged 6 months later. I helped her plan the wedding, playing the perfect stepmother role while Richard beamed proudly. Are you happy? Rachel asked me over wine one night. Really happy? I thought about the path not taken, the door that stayed closed that night, the coffee shop conversation that could have gone differently. I'm content, I answered honestly. Sometimes that's enough. James and Sophie had their first child, a girl named Emma. I became Grandma Tina, which made me laugh considering I was barely 40. Richard retired, finally ready to be present. We traveled, reconnected, found a new rhythm. Years passed. The tension faded to a dull ache, then to nostalgia, then to something like peace. At family gatherings, James and I could share genuine smiles. The electricity was gone, replaced by warm familiarity. One Christmas Eve, long after everyone had left, I found an envelope in my photography studio. Inside was a photo from that gallery opening years ago. James and me laughing, caught in an unguarded moment. On the back he'd written, "Some choices shape us even when we don't make them. Thank you for being strong enough for both of us." I tucked the photo away in my private box of memories, next to the coffee shop receipt I'd kept all these years. Some loves aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to teach us who we are. Richard called from downstairs, asking about dinner plans. I took one last look at the photo before closing the box. "Coming, honey," I called back, leaving the studio and the might-have-beens behind. Sometimes the bravest love is the one we choose not to pursue. James and I had our moment of almost, our coffee shop confession, our night of temptation. But we chose differently. We chose family, responsibility, the longer road. Now watching him build his life with Sophie, seeing the man he's become, I know we made the right choice. Some fires are meant to forge us, not consume us. The next time I saw him was at Emma's first birthday. He caught my eye across the room and smiled. A real smile, free of regret or longing. We'd found our way back to family, back to normal. Different people than we were that heated night, but better for having faced the choice. Richard squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. This was my life. Not perfect, but chosen. Every day, chosen again. And that was enough. 5 years passed like photographs in an album. Emma grew into a precocious kindergartner, joined by her little brother Jack 2 years ago. I watched from a careful distance as James mastered fatherhood, seeing echoes of those nurturing instincts he'd once shown me. Sophie's career took off, a brilliant environmental lawyer. She and James built their dream home in the suburbs, all clean lines and huge windows. He'd designed it himself, and I recognized touches of the architectural sketches he used to show me over breakfast. "You should come by the new house," he said at a family barbecue. "The light in the sunroom. It'd be perfect for your photography." I caught Richard watching us. These normal stepmother-stepson interactions that once held such electricity, now they were just family, the way they should be. "Remember when you taught me to make lasagna?" James asked one Thanksgiving, as we all worked in his kitchen. Sophie was entertaining Emma while Jack napped upstairs. "I still use your recipe." "You were a terrible student," I laughed. "There was flour everywhere." "Some things never change," Sophie called from the living room. "You should see him try to bake cookies with Emma." These moments felt earned now, comfortable instead of charged. We'd built something better than passion: trust, respect, family bonds that could weather any storm. Richard and I found our second wind. With him truly retired, we traveled. Paris, Rome, places we'd always talked about but never seen. In Venice, watching the sunset over the Grand Canal, he asked, "Were you ever happy when I was away so much?" I thought carefully before answering. "I was lonely," I admitted, "but it made me stronger. Sometimes distance teaches us what we really want." He held my hand tighter. We weren't the same people who'd drifted apart years ago. Time had smoothed our rough edges, taught us to appreciate what we had. James's firm partnered with my gallery for a charity event. Watching him work the room in his tailored suit, confident and successful, I felt only pride. The old ache was gone, replaced by genuine joy at the man he'd become. "You helped raise him right," Sophie said, appearing beside me. "He talks about you, you know. How you were there when his dad wasn't. How you taught him to appreciate art and beauty." My throat tightened. He taught me things too. Later that night, after most guests had left, James found me arranging prints. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for making the hard choice when I couldn't." "We both did," I corrected gently. "And look at everything you've built." He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that now belonged to his children. "Emma wants to learn photography,"